You're standing at the cruise terminal with your bags packed, your excitement building, and your boarding pass in hand. But this year, something has changed. 5 new rules are quietly turning away passengers who did everything they thought was right. A 63-year-old couple from Ohio drove 6 hours, checked in early, and were still denied at the gate because of one overlooked detail on their paperwork, a detail nobody had warned them about when they booked, a detail that had changed only a few months before their sailing date. Cruise terminals across the country processed more turned-away passengers this year than any year on record, and most of them truly had no idea the rules had shifted under their feet while they were busy packing sunscreen and swimsuits. Today we are breaking down the 5 brand new rules catching cruisers off guard right now, the ones nobody warns you about until you are standing at the counter watching your vacation disappear in front of your eyes. These are not old warnings you have already heard a dozen times. These are new changes rolling out across major cruise lines right now. Changes most passengers only discover the hard way, standing at the counter with a boarding pass that suddenly means nothing. Stick around, because rule number 3 has already stopped thousands of people this year alone, and it could easily be you next, so pay close attention. Section 1. Missing or change visa checkmumps. Every one of these 5 rules follows the same pattern: a quiet policy update, a passenger who trusted last year's experience, and a terminal agent who has zero authority to make an exception no matter how sympathetic they might feel. Keep that pattern in mind as we go through each one, because recognizing the pattern is honestly half the protection you need. The first rule catching people off guard involves visas, and it is catching more travelers than any other issue this season. Cruise itineraries quietly shift, ports get swapped, and countries update their entry rules faster than most travel agents can keep up with, sometimes changing a policy just weeks before a ship arrives. A retired teacher from Sacramento booked a Mediterranean cruise 18 months in advance, and by the time she boarded, one of her port countries had changed its visa policy for American citizens, requiring an electronic travel authorization she never knew existed until a crew member explained it to her at the gangway. She was denied disembarkation for that specific port and had to stay on the ship while her husband explored alone, a moment she still calls the most embarrassing travel experience of her life. Worse than any lost luggage or missed flight in 40 years of travel. Here is what most passengers do not realize. Your cruise line is not legally responsible for informing you of every visa change between booking and sailing. That responsibility sits entirely with you as the traveler, no matter how much money you spent on the cabin. Some countries now require electronic authorizations that must be approved days, or even weeks before arrival, not something you can fix standing at the terminal with a credit card and a smile. The insider move is simple. 3 weeks before your cruise, search the exact name of every port country combined with the words entry requirements for US citizens, and do this again 1 week before departure, because policies can shift twice in a single season without any warning to travel agents or booking websites. If your itinerary includes any country outside the country where you are boarding, treat every single one as a separate research project, not just the final destination, because a single missed port can ruin an otherwise perfect trip. Cruise lines have started adding a small line in your documents mentioning visa responsibility, but it is buried in paragraph. After paragraph of boarding information, most people skim past in 30 seconds while they are focused on packing lists and dinner reservations. Do not be the passenger standing at the terminal explaining that nobody told you, because the terminal staff have heard that sentence 1,000 times. And the answer is always the same: no exceptions, no refunds, and no sympathy for good intentions. Keep a folder, digital or paper, with a printed confirmation for every visa or entry authorization tied to your itinerary, and bring it with you even if you already submitted it online, because systems fail and printouts do not. It also helps to call your specific cruise line and ask a live representative to confirm the current visa requirement for each port on your exact sailing date, since website information can lag behind real-world policy changes by several weeks. Travel agents who specialize in cruises often catch these changes faster than a general online search, so if you booked through an agent, use that relationship and ask directly, rather than assuming they already checked for you, because most agents wait to be asked before digging into port-specific entry rules. A 5-minute phone call today can prevent an entire day of your vacation from being spent staring at a ship from the wrong side of the gangway. Section 2. Wrong or missing travel documents. The second rule involves the documents you actually bring to the terminal, and this one is stricter than it has ever been. For years, cruise lines allowed a little flexibility: a slightly expired passport, a birth certificate with a small smudge, a driver's license that was close enough to pass a quick glance. That flexibility is gone this season, replaced by a level of scrutiny that used to exist only at international airports. A family of 4 from Phoenix arrived at the port for a 7-day Caribbean cruise, and the father's passport had expired 4 months earlier, something he had not checked since their last trip years ago, because he assumed a passport simply worked until you needed it renewed for a new photo. The entire family was turned away at the gangway, no refund offered for that missed sailing, and no exceptions made despite the tears, the pleading, and the manager they asked to speak with twice. Cruise terminal staff are now trained to check expiration dates with a precision that did not exist 5 years ago, largely because international ports have tightened requirements on cruise lines themselves, pushing that pressure straight down onto passengers who never see the paperwork behind the scenes. Here is the rule most people miss. Many countries require your passport to remain valid for 6 months beyond your return date, not just valid on the day you sail out of port. A passport that expires 2 months after your cruise ends can still get you denied boarding on day 1, even though technically it has not expired yet according to the date printed on the cover. The insider move is to check every passport in your traveling party. The moment you book, not the week before, mark the expiration date directly in your calendar with a 6-month buffer built in, and if anyone is close to that window, renew immediately, because passport processing times have stretched longer than most people still expect this year. For domestic sailings, a passport card or an enhanced driver's license works in many cases, but the rules vary by cruise line and by state, so verify directly with your specific cruise line rather than trusting a general rule you read somewhere online months ago. The passengers getting turned away this year are not reckless, they are simply trusting outdated information, and that gap between old rules and new enforcement is exactly where this trap lives, quietly waiting for the next confident traveler who has not checked in a while. Consider setting a recurring reminder every year on your birthday to check every travel document in your household, treating it the same way you treat a smoke detector battery: small effort now, disaster avoided later. It is also worth checking the physical condition of your passport, not just the expiration date, because torn pages, water damage, or a peeling laminate cover on the photo page have all led to denied boarding this year, even with months of validity remaining. Terminal agents are instructed to flag any document that looks compromised in any way, and once flagged, there is rarely an appeal process available on the spot, so a passport that looks slightly worn deserves a replacement well before your trip, rather than a gamble at the counter. Section 3. Arriving after your assigned boarding window. The third rule is the one causing the most heartbreak this year, and it involves something that used to be a minor inconvenience: arriving after your assigned check-in time. Cruise lines have moved to strict staggered boarding windows, partly for security and partly to manage crowd flow at busy terminals, and what used to be a gentle suggestion has become a hard cutoff enforced by staff with little room to negotiate. A couple from Denver, celebrating their 40th anniversary, arrived 90 minutes after their assigned window because of highway construction they could not have predicted, and despite the ship still sitting at the dock for another 2 hours, they were told boarding had closed for their group and they would need to fly to catch the ship at the next port at their own expense, turning a dream anniversary into an unplanned scramble through an airport. This is happening more often because cruise lines now use your boarding window to control the exact flow of security screening and check-in stations. And once that window closes, the system moves on without you, regardless of how close the ship still is to the dock, and regardless of how many empty check-in counters you can see sitting right in front of you. Here is what almost nobody understands. The ship's actual departure time and your boarding cutoff time are two completely different things, and the boarding cutoff is often 2 to 3 hours earlier than most passengers assume based on the departure time printed on their ticket. The insider move is to treat your assigned window as the real deadline, not a target, and to build in enough travel buffer that even a serious delay leaves you with breathing room instead of panic. If you are flying in for your cruise, avoid booking a flight that lands the same day because a single weather delay or mechanical issue can strand you outside a boarding window that will not bend for anyone, no matter how apologetic the airline is about the delay. If you do encounter unexpected delays despite your best planning, call the cruise line's emergency line immediately while you are still traveling, because early contact sometimes buys flexibility that showing up unannounced never will, and a proactive phone call is always better than a surprised face at the counter. Print your boarding window time in large letters and tape it somewhere. You will see it the morning of departure, because in the rush of loading luggage and finding parking, that specific detail is the one people forget until it is far too late to fix. Traffic near cruise terminals on peak sailing days can be far worse than any map application predicts, since thousands of vehicles converge on the same few streets within the same 2-hour stretch. So adding an extra hour of buffer beyond what your navigation app suggests is not overly cautious. It is simply realistic given how these ports actually operate on a busy Saturday morning. Section 4. New passport and birth certificate correctments. The fourth rule centers on a quiet but significant shift in how identification documents are verified, and it is tripping up travelers who have sailed dozens of times without ever hitting a problem before this year. For years, a certified copy of a birth certificate combined with a government-issued photo identification was enough to board most domestic and some international sailings without anyone looking twice. New security protocols at several major ports have tightened that standard, now requiring original documents rather than copies, and rejecting photocopied or laminated birth certificates that were once accepted without a second glance from the agent at the counter. A grandmother from San Diego traveling with her adult grandson brought a laminated birth certificate that had worked perfectly fine on 3 previous cruises, only to be told this time that lamination made the document invalid, because officials could no longer verify certain security features embedded in the paper underneath the plastic coating. She missed the cruise entirely while her grandson sailed alone, a mistake that cost her nearly $2,000 in non-refundable fees and a vacation she had been planning for over a year. The insider move here is straightforward but often overlooked. Always request a fresh certified copy of your birth certificate directly from your state's Vital Records office. If yours is more than a few years old or shows any signs of wear, and never laminate an original document, no matter how tempting it feels, to protect it from coffee spills or torn edges. If you are relying on a passport rather than a birth certificate, remember that a passport card is not accepted for international sailings, even though it looks nearly identical to a valid travel document, a mix-up that has caught even experienced cruisers completely off guard at the very last moment. Call your specific cruise line's documentation department directly before your trip, describe exactly which documents you plan to bring, and get written confirmation, because verbal assurances from a call center do not carry weight if a terminal supervisor disagrees with you on the day of boarding, and there is nothing in writing to back you up. Consider scanning every document into a secure folder on your phone as a backup, not as a replacement for the original, but as proof of what you intended to bring in case a dispute happens at the counter and you need to show a supervisor exactly what the document looked like before it was rejected. It is also worth ordering any replacement documents at least 2 months before your sale date rather than waiting until a few weeks out, since state vital records offices have seen a sharp rise in requests this year, pushing processing times well beyond what most people expect when they finally decide to check their paperwork. Section 5. Structure Einwand AG Restrictions on Certain Cruises. The 5th and final rule is catching young families completely by surprise, and it involves the minimum age requirements for infants on certain sailings that many parents assume have not changed since their last trip. Cruise lines have quietly tightened these restrictions, particularly on longer voyages and sailings that cross open ocean for multiple consecutive days, without a port stop, citing limited access to onboard medical care for very young children in an emergency far from land. A young couple from Austin booked a transatlantic crossing to celebrate their daughter's first birthday, not realizing their 6-month-old son, born after the booking was made, fell below the new minimum age threshold that had been quietly updated for that specific route just months earlier, without any direct notification to passengers already booked. They arrived at the terminal with all their paperwork in perfect order, only to be turned away because their infant was 2 months younger than the newly required minimum for that particular itinerary, a rule that did not exist when they originally reserved their cabin nearly a year before. This is especially painful because many families assume the age requirement they remember from a previous cruise still applies, when in reality, cruise lines adjust these thresholds by route, by ship, and sometimes by season without any dramatic announcement or email sent out to existing bookings. The insider move is to verify the exact minimum age requirement for your specific sailing, not the cruise line in general, every single time you book, and again about 30 days before departure. Since itineraries occasionally shift between booking and sailing in ways that change the medical risk profile of the route entirely. Transatlantic and transpacific crossings typically carry stricter minimums than short Caribbean or coastal sailings, often requiring infants to be at least 12 months old rather than the standard 6 months seen on shorter itineraries closer to shore. If you are traveling with a baby anywhere close to a cutoff age, call the cruise line directly. Ask for the requirement in writing and keep that confirmation with your travel documents, because a printed policy from months ago will not override whatever the terminal supervisor is enforcing on the actual day you arrive with your family and your bags. Build in a buffer of at least 1 full month above the stated minimum age whenever possible, because policies can tighten again before your sail date, and a wide margin protects you far better than meeting the requirement exactly on paper. If you are traveling with grandchildren rather than your own children, confirm this requirement with your own eyes rather than trusting a second-hand summary from your adult children who booked the trip, since a small miscommunication about a birth date has been enough to strand an entire multi-generational family at the terminal while the rest of the group boards without them. 5 simple rules, easy to overlook and easy to fix once you know them, and every single one of them has already denied real passengers boarding this year, not because they were careless, but because the rules shifted quietly while their expectations stayed the same as the last time they sailed. The pattern across all 5 is the same lesson repeated in different forms. The requirements you remember from your last cruise are not guaranteed to be the requirements waiting for you at the terminal this time, and assuming otherwise is the single most expensive mistake a traveler can make. Treat every sailing as its own research project, verify documents early, respect your boarding window like it is the actual departure time, and confirm anything unusual about your travel party well before you are standing at the counter with your bags in hand and a line of people behind you. If this video helped you avoid becoming the next story we tell, subscribe to Senior Cruise Secrets and turn on notifications, because we track these changes as they happen and share them before they cost you your vacation and your peace of mind. Drop a comment and let us know which of these 5 rules you are checking before your next cruise, and share this with anyone you know who has a sailing coming up, because the passengers getting denied at the terminal this year are the ones who simply had not heard about these changes yet. And now, thanks to a few extra minutes today, you have. None of this is meant to scare you away from cruising at all. It is meant to hand you the information cruise lines assume you already know, but rarely spell out clearly. And a well-prepared traveler almost never becomes one of these stories. They simply walk up the gangway, hand over the right documents, and start their vacation exactly on schedule. Safe travels, and we will see you on the next video breaking down what else has quietly changed at sea. because these terminals update their rules more often than most travelers realize, and staying one step ahead is the difference between a smooth boarding and a story you tell for years about the vacation that almost never happened.